All right. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the THPStrength podcast. On today's episode, we actually have a really special guest. We have Patric Pyle. Patric, go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and then some of your accolades.
Hey, I appreciate it, John and Austin, and I look forward to the podcast today. Hey, look, I'm a coach. I'm a track and field coach. This is actually my 30th year in the sport. I started in ninth grade in 1994. Anyways, and I got into the sport actually for high jumping and sprinting. I was an old baseball player and came up and did all of that, and got into the sport of track and field. I had some buddies that were sprinting and jumping, and me being me, and I'm feeling like I was faster than them and could probably jump higher than them and whatever. And so I made my way over there into track and field, and it's just kind of stuck ever since.
We'll actually get into it now because I have a lot of questions. So the first question I have, what has Shelby tested in an approach like run and like jump and touch? And how often do you do it?
We use the Vertec, obviously that's, it's a 1-to-1, for what we do. Obviously we're trying to jump high, right? So, we use the Vertec, once every couple of months. And I think we'll probably do it here again. We have one more meet this season, September 14th, Diamond League final.
Right.
So, we'll probably use it one more time here in the next, probably next week sometime. And really, we're having fun with it. And, it kind of gives us a chance to jump really high without, without a limited 10-foot basketball rim, but also too, not jumping over a bar. A flop high jump, if you will. He's touched 11.9, legitimately 11.9. His standing reach is 8 feet 2 inches. So I think it's 43 inches. I think is the differential, something like that, and that's off of 1 foot. That's off of 1 foot with 3 steps. So
3
that
steps.
Would be,
so he's going left, right, left.
So that would be a right, left, right, because he's a right foot jumper.
You're right.
Yeah, right.
When he dunks,
right,
does he dunk off his right foot as well?
He dunks off of his right foot as well. Yeah, he's left-handed. He is left-handed.
Okay, I don't know why I knew that. Like, I obviously should know that, but for some reason, when I see it, it doesn't like register. Which I think this is a good time to pull up. Probably
pull up some clips, John.
Yeah, let's pull up some clips because I don't know if people know how freaky Shelby was whenever he was in.
By nature. Yeah, by his nature.
Have you ever seen the original YouTube video of this, Pat?
Actually, I came across this video in 2017, and I think I had mentioned to you before, I actually made a sequence of 3 positions that he was in, and that was actually the first time I had ever seen him. I had no idea, and I just said, this guy's a high jumper.
Let's watch this because this is something rare. You don't see high jumpers. Well, oftentimes you don't see a lot of dunkers. Great dunkers convert to great high jumpers. Like I see it all the time. Guys try and they end up going out and jumping 6'4".
Yeah,
that's not set. What is in feet and inches? What is it? He jumps.
He is 6 feet 2 inches tall. He's 187, 188 legitimately. I've measured it myself, and he's been measured in other places as well. And plus, we've stood literally back to back, and we are exactly the same height.
And he's high jumps 2 inches.
He's basically 7'9", 2 meters 36, which is like 7'8.9".
That's so freaking high.
Yeah, it's basically 7'9". Yeah.
So we'll watch this. You've talked about this. You've talked about some of the positions that you saw.
Right. What there, was exactly? You're in all of it right now.
Yeah. So what was like you're going through this? What was something that you were like, oh, this is like quintessential what I want to see?
Was right there, exactly where you're at.
The hip moving forward.
Yeah, the penultimate, pushing the hips forward, getting into position, getting into the backward lean. The obviously the long axis that's developing there. And then the free leg, and then the rotation through the takeoff right there, through the slight hip rotation there from left to right.
So you're talking about right this there. Rotating
right
and pushing
there,
this leg down to the ground.
And then he just keeps rotating. If you'll notice, as you keep going, he just slightly keeps rotating. The hips slightly keep coming around in the air. And to me, that's a high jumper. I mean,
You're
that's,
talking about in the transverse, like this is twisting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
That's actually
And so
crazy.
mine
This
will,
jump
and
is insane
Yeah,
in
it's
slow
crazy frame
motion.
by frame too. This is nuts.
it's really,
Really impressive. Yeah.
I mean, he
that
flew
right
on
there. You
that.
can see how much he's turned.
Completely in the air. So he's rotated.
Yeah.
Now, not to get
Into a long discussion because I mean this is maybe for another day on a more technical kind of podcast if we're just going to talk straight technique or whatever. But Shelby said, Coach, nobody's ever said that to me. Nobody's ever pointed out how I was turning in the air. And and the thing is notice that he doesn't have necessarily a curve. We don't have inward lean, so we don't necessarily have a centrifugal force from a direct result of inward lean. We have
Yeah.
backward lean.
And obviously there's a forward somersaulting that's going on, but there's also a rotation of the hip. So the question, the body is turning in the air this way. It's actually axially rotating
Yeah.
in
the air. So the
I
question would
never
be,
identified
go ahead.
that, but that is such a good
Yeah.
point. His knee
So-
drives
so-
across the body,
Yes, exactly.
and then
so the
his
question would
pelvis is
be,
rotating.
the pelvis is rotating.
And I mean, the whole thing is what if, now obviously, he's not going to jump that far out in an actual high jump. But, somebody like Mutaz Barshim that's been at 6 and 7 feet out, Shelby's probably at about 4.5 feet out on his best dunks. I think maybe about 4.5 feet.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is that whole thing of the parabolic curve and the rotation. Well, what if the athlete just simply keeps rotating and just goes ahead and lays out over the bar? Now,
Right.
I don't think that that's where you're going to see, a 2 meter 46 high jump or something like that. It's just simply too far out. But the whole big thing was that axial rotation in the air. I looked at all that and said, hey, this guy can high jump. And I had no idea that he was a high jumper. But
that is insane.
Shelby and I have changed his approach this year. So he traditionally had a 10-step approach, kind of like what I was talking about with Jerron Robinson.
Shelby's had a
10-step approach for a long time that started from a static start and basically like you're coming out of the blocks, just shoot out of the back. And that's something that we have changed. We've changed it again to the 1-2, what I call 1-2 skip and go. I find that a lead in or a mobile start, whatever, there's different names for it. I just call it a lead in. I personally, I think from an energy expenditure standpoint, it's easier. I think just from a muscular fatigue standpoint, it's easier. And I just think that it's easier to just bring more velocity into the plant. And so we've changed it from a 10-step static to a 1-2 skip and go into 8 running steps. So actually he's running 2 steps shorter. But I think it's actually created more consistency.
Watching this all, there's so many things that I have kind of always wondered, and I have a lot of questions. So one, we see really common in dunking and high jump that guys that are really, really good at dunking, I'm talking like myself, Austin, some of my other athletes, they can get their head basically to a 10-foot rim, right? And Shelby's now touched, 11.9. That's only off 3 steps. So what do you think is the major difference? Because I'm a 6'6" high jumper, best day ever, right? But my best day dunking ever, my head's at the rim. So we look at that, right? And like on a 10-foot rim, I've gotten my head inches away from it, right? Why is it that I jump a foot and a foot and 3 inches lower, 15 inches lower in the high jump, but the disparity between my dunks and Shelby's dunks or jumps, right, are not 15 inches? What do you think the reason for that is?
I mean, hey,
It's a good question. I mean, are you talking about 1 foot? Talking about dunking off 1 foot?
Yep. So
Yeah,
I'll show you.
I'll
show
be
you
honest
actually.
with you. What I would
Would be interested in, Shelby and I were actually just talking about this. Shelby asked me, where do you think my head would be on a 236 type jump? So it's going to be well over the rim. I said, you're probably going to be jaw level. I mean, if you think about how high basically, in the vertex and stuff like that, you're going to be really, really high. Now, whenever we're on the basketball court just messing around and he'll do some 1 step, off of 3 steps or off of 4 steps or something like that, his head really, he may be about eye level. But I think there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, obviously adrenaline, hey, there's just some days. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, it's a deal of like you just show up and the adrenaline, your nervous system's fired up. There's a lot of factors that go into that. I mean, I would assume that maybe at dunk camp or something like that, hey, that's going to be some of your best days or something like that. Very much like a meet competition,
Right.
So, I mean, it's a deal that there's a lot, but keep going on that. That's going to be my quickest answer.
What is your lens on speed jumping versus power jumping? Can you switch?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a lot harder than, kind of like what you're talking about. I think it's a lot harder to do than what a lot of people may realize. And obviously you have to be pretty coordinated too. You have to know the difference, and you have to be one of those athletes that can make a change, I think, on the spot or whatever. There are some who can and just some who can't. I've worked literally with athletes who cannot make a change on the spot, because if you tell them one thing, there's going to be 5 preceding things that are all of a sudden
I
going to go
100%
wrong.
agree.
So sometimes it's a deal of like,
don't even fight that battle. Don't even try to make that change. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they're winning meets or they're doing whatever they're doing. And it's really not worth it. Now there are some athletes, I mean, like Shelby. I mean, we have literally changed his approach this year. And we did that when we first started working together last season. We actually changed his approach on the spot, and he changed it on the spot. Now we went back to the old approach because he was more comfortable with it. Just kind of because it was hardwired. He had been doing that for years.
Right.
But we made the change this year. Going into the season, we said, okay, it's from day one, the approach is going to change. And so we went from the 10-step static to the 8-step, and and he's been able to make those changes. Now, he didn't make change, but he is technically a power jumper, right? You see basically almost the toe dragging the ground, double arm block, and things like that. But you have guys like Giron and Javier Sotomayor, who were power jumpers who jumped actually really close. I mean, Javier Sotomayor, for jumping 245, jumped really close to the bar. Would go straight up and straight down. And Giron was very much the same way. So hey, there are people who are just, that's the way they're wired. If I moved Giron back and tried to get him to have a little bit longer parabola, it was like he was going to find the same takeoff spot every time. He was almost going to jump into the spot. It was like he was just hardwired to know, or he was hardwired that was where he was going to take off.
In high school, the same way. The number one cue that took me up 6 inches in my high jump, because I was a power jumper through and through, was go straight up, straight down. Land as close as you can to the front of the mat, because that allowed me to run a little slower. It allowed me to work around the lack of internal rotation. It allowed me to kind of game a little bit of the rotation that I lacked, because I think, and this is something else I wanted to ask, is like, so I will say this, I think you can learn it. It just to speed jump, but you won't learn it well.
Right.
And I think
it matters. It depends. It depends on your coordination.
Yeah. Cause this took me, this was off the opposite leg, and I can still do this today. Right? Look, you hear, and here we go. Look at that.
Yep.
Kicks up to the butt. I still double arm block, but I was able to do it. I can single arm block. I can double arm block. But here's the thing. And I get decent lift. It's not great, but I get decent lift. This knee will never drive away from the bar.
Right.
Will not drive away from the bar. Can't do it. So no matter how hard I tried, I could not do it. I could do it here. I could do it here all day, and I could get a little bit of lift, not a ton. Not near as much as I was getting off power jumping off my left leg. I could come in on any given day, and on 10 feet, I could just crush dunks, but speed jumping could not get that twisting action. I think another interesting one is Tora Harris. Tora Harris actually did convert to a speed jumper. He was a power jumper through and through, and then all of a sudden you get this action. Look at that knee drive away from the bar. Beautiful jump. One of my favorite jumpers. So I think that it's one of those things where it's like, and I've tested it for years and years and years, and I've talked to a lot of people that naturally are speed jumpers. Like there's this guy, I don't know, you know who Nick Briz is?
No, I think I've heard the name, but no, I don't.
He is one of the most disgusting jumpers I've ever. Austin, would you agree with this?
I've been muted because the guy's drilling and sawing.
Oh, that's fine. But don't you think he's one of the most disgusting?
No, absolutely.
jumpers?
I've never seen someone freakier. Like, it does not look like he can jump. Like, he's nuts.
So
Absolutely.
he is
How
naturally a
tall
speed
is he?
jumper.
How tall is he? Like,
I'll pull him up right now. He's about
5'11".
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay.
I mean, you can see he will. I mean, he can just take off from so far. So
Yeah.
Give him like a dunk. Give just because it's
yeah,
nasty.
yeah. Let me see. This
That
will
one.
be-
Eh.
That's mediocre. There's a decent windmill. The video the other day with you, Austin, there's a decent angle of a good jump. So
There's
he's
like
probably
one where
6
that one
foot.
is crazy.
Oh, here's going to be disgusting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you can see the lift on that.
It does not. He does not lift. He did not like lift legs and nothing. He just ran some bleachers once in a while. Did a lot of upper body. Crazy.
It's disgusting. So,
Can you guys hear the sawing, or is it loud? Or
no, you're good. I can't hear
oh,
you.
okay. That's
all
why I keep
good.
like
Yeah,
muting. I haven't
perfect.
said anything. I'm like, I'm in this video actually.
You are.
Yeah, somewhere.
He just floats, and it's
Yeah,
like he can do it with a ball in his hand. You talk about
Yeah.
how complex speed jumping is. Like
Yeah.
he does it with a ball.
Wait,
in his
go
hand,
back,
one
John.
dribbling.
Go back, John.
He reminds me so much of Jordy, though. Like they jump the same exact way. Well, Jordy
Yeah,
palms the ball, but
Yeah.
when he dunks, but they are so similar.
John, can you go back real quick?
Yeah.
There's a really freaky one. There's go down to the left from that. Yes, that he's jumping over me laying down actually.
Yeah.
Nice.
Isn't that crazy?
Nice. Yeah.
What's else?
Yeah.
You know what else is crazy, Pat?
Yeah.
He takes off his toe, like
Okay.
Jordy.
Okay.
Okay.
So what is your? Actually, before we get into this, I have a question about volume, but I want to talk about speed jumping. Do you think? Why do you think jumpers? I've tried it. I've played around with it, and I think the side of the foot is like possible, but Nick takes off like sometimes I swear he's on his like the ball of his foot.
Okay.
Like, what is your lens on that?
Well, I mean,
What happens when he's planting? I mean, is he striking? Is he striking heel and then rolling over to the ball of the foot, and then, or he's striking with the ball of the foot?
Yeah,
man, that's
That I mean, I don't see how you're going to teach that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it,
it's-
but you see a jumper like him, and it's tempting to want to be like, I want to learn to do that. I want to try.
Well, and I think
and again, hey, I just think that it's kind of that whole saying of there's just some things that can't be taught. People are wired the way that they're wired. I mean, it's like Jordan, Jordy Wessner. I mean, the guy is just constantly up on the balls of his feet. Heels aren't touching the ground. Now his heel touches the ground when he's high jumping. I mean, he comes in and he plants heel and then rolls over to the ball of the foot and then rolls off obviously the big toe, second toe, and all of that.
Look at this. Look at. I don't know if you could see that jump.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah, let's see that. Let's see what we got.
Let me go back to the.
Yeah.
We're gonna need to get back to the start of this. He was going off this day. All right, so here we go. Austin, are you in this?
No, this is Waterford though, bro.
So there's
a heel.
penultimate. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I gotta try to. It's really hard to. It's really hard to pause it. There you go. You can kind of see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is he? I mean, it's hard for me to see, but is he rolling on the left foot? Is he rolling heel to the ball of the foot?
No,
I mean, there are
That's
videos.
incredible.
I have studied him in slow motion, frame by frame, and it looks like he takes off like kind of like on this part of his foot right here.
Okay. Yeah,
I might have to I might have to switch my battery for my camera in a second here.
Yeah.
That's how good this
and
conversation
I
is.
guess my question
Would be, I mean, has he ever had any, major patella tendon? I know you've talked about a
That's
lot
the thing.
about
No,
patella tendonitis.
he's only ever had hamstring
wow.
issues.
He's
Okay.
had knee issues. No, he had lower back and then hamstring stuff actually.
That's it.
Interesting.
He had some patella, but all he would do is stretch a ton, and then take off basically, just stretch and take off for like a couple weeks. He'd smoke some weed, come back, play fine, totally good.
This guy is one of the most genetically gifted freaky athletes I have ever seen in my entire life, and that's where I was like, okay, like different strokes for different folks. I'm not that guy. I'm never gonna be that guy, and I'm okay with that.
That look, I mean, that's
the reality of it, and that's what a lot of people have to, hey, I mean, it is what it is. Genetics are what they are, and some people are just wired. They're wired in a certain way, and there really is no true, I guess, maybe explanation for it. It just, you know, I mean, it just, that's the way it is. And it's not something, you know, hey, it may go against you know, what we may see as ideal or whatever, or maybe a model that we're trying to teach or whatever, but that is just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And I just don't think that there's
enough of it out there. You know, if you saw if there was a commonality between some of these athletes, you know, that if we saw that a lot more, then there would be something, I think, to it. But in a little bit of a one-off, or, you know, maybe you see it in another athlete, but you just don't see it very often.
You know, it's something else I've really thought about, because there's an athlete, right? His name's Pat Dickert. He, off his non-dominant leg, is a speed jumper, and off his dominant leg, he's a power jumper, right? Okay. So I was like, how is that possible? And you're equivalent at both, right? And when he was a kid, he told me all I did was I practiced left-handed layups. I was bad at them, and I just started running really fast when he was like 10 years old. And then all of a sudden, one day, he's dunking from the free throw line at 6'1". Okay. And he was like a 23, 24-foot long jumper or whatever. And I'm like, dude, you could have been so good at high jump if you could have like figured that out a little bit. But he's like, yeah, I just one day went out and just started running really fast. And that's how I did my layups. And then all of a sudden, that's how I would dunk off that leg. And he needed a ton of speed to do it. And the other and I'm like, okay, maybe that's something, right? Because you are a power jumper off your other leg. And then the other thing I thought was, because it's an argument of like, is it nature or is it nurture? And I think it's a little bit of both. And the other thing too is I did learn how to speed jump, technically speaking. I just wasn't able to actualize it, you know, in high jump to a point, because I didn't have the twisting rotation. I just couldn't generate that. So I was like, okay, like that's the other issue. And I started pulling my hamstring a lot. That was the other thing too, which I have a different hypothesis about that. I think that you have to co-contract way faster on the hamstring, because the time between toe off and touchdown is much faster relative to power jumping. So I was like, I think that's probably why, is I'm generating a lot of force in my quad that I'm not used to generating that fast. And, you know, that you need to do that. You have to reposition so quickly in speed jumping. And so I was like, okay, maybe that's something. And then in regards to, you know, it being nature and nurture, the other thing I observe is soccer players are oftentimes speed jumpers. And they're not great athletes. They're not fast. They don't have crazy stiff contacts. And I'm like, well, why would that happen? Well, if you look at the plant leg on a soccer kick, you know, when they plant the leg, and what is the free leg doing?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly
right. And Ed, I've looked at exactly the same thing, and you see the positions, and they're very, very similar. I may have to. I've got some rain coming in here, so I'm gonna have to go inside here in just a minute.
Go.
Yeah,
I would say
let's do
this. I gotta change my battery. Battery. I'll pause the podcast. We're good. So we were talking a little bit about speed jumping, kind of came to the conclusion, maybe, you know, there's a relationship between the, you know, guys playing soccer and kind of the free leg coming through. Maybe not, kind of, maybe not. Again, theoretical, hypothetical, but you and I are seeing at least consistencies. So I want to get on to volume, because I've talked to Jordy a lot, Jordan Wessner, and I was like, Jordy, what are you doing to like become so wired? And he's like, well, John, we do a lot of quarter squatting. We do, you know, I really never, you know, man, I never deep squat ever. And I do a lot of really fast step jumps. We come in sometimes. Pat has us do some approaches and we leave. That's it. And that's what he told me. And that's really all I know. So how much volume are you doing with your athletes?
Yeah. I mean, no. Great question. And, you know, look, I mean, the volume of work isn't low. You know, I have several philosophies in terms of how you get fit. Okay. And there's the word fit, right? Because
high jump fit. Let's say high
jump fit. That's exactly right. Or, you know, horizontal jump fit or whatever it may be. Okay. Number one, the first thing is, how many jumps are you going to take in a competition? You know, it's going to be a deal of like, okay, when you factor in that you're going to take 3 or 4 jumps in the warm up, you may have 8 to 12 jumps in the competition. Let's just say that you're looking anywhere between 12 and 16 jumps. Okay. Well, what is a jump? Okay. So, we do big warm ups that have a lot of movement in it. because I mean, it really is. I mean, whatever people want to call it or whatever, you have to build a foundation, right? You have to get strong. That's the other thing too, that should be number one as well is strong. But then again, there's context in that. What is strength, right? So being able to jump 12 to 16 times at a high level, relative to the person, whatever, it doesn't matter. Austin, if you can go and reel off 12 to 14, 12 or 16 jumps at say 6 feet, or 6'2" or whatever it is that your PR is, relative to you, that's a high level, right? And that's one of the ways that I define, what it is that we're trying to do. We're trying to get fit to be able to jump, that many times. So what takes place in that? Well, relative general fitness matters. Okay. One of the things that I picked up, at K-State, 24 years ago, we're very structured. And I think you probably have a history with this, kind of being under Mike Young, and knowing where Mike Young came from. We have a lot of very close colleagues, if you will. It's the network is all tied in
now. This is a conversation that needed to happen a long time ago, but I could pull up right now, Dan Paft, Mike Young, Boo Schexnayder, all those guys,
Cliff Revelto, all those guys, Gary Winkler. It's all very similar stuff. And we have generations of coaches. That was a generation of coaches that was before me. And I came, and now it's your generation. I mean, if you will, they're the grandpa, I'm the son, you're the grandson, right?
Which honestly, I love. I'm more than happy with that.
And you mentioned the other day that there's 17-year-olds, that are coming up who have this incredible knowledge and, and understanding. And so they're the next generation. Now, I don't know how much that they're going to be referencing, Dan Path, Gary Winkler, Cliff Revelto, guys like that, Boo Schexnayder. I hope that they do, and that's actually where I'm going with all this. But very structured warm-ups.
So this is like one of the fundamental ones that I've used. I think you can see my screen. Oh, this one doesn't have it, but it's something like, this is probably the best one. So we've got 50-meter skip, 50-meter windmill skip, 50-meter backward skip lunge, 50-meter side skip, 50-meter 180 side skip, 50-meter wide step run, 50-meter weave run, 50-meter backward weave run. And then sometimes I'll put some build-ups in there at the end. And so then, I'm going into some dynamic flexibility. So I come into here, I've got all my circuits or whatever planned out so that I can easily find things when I program for athletes. I go here, and I've got knee circle, trunk circle, lead trail leg lift, dynamic plow, split scissor, single arm. And this is all dynamic flexibility stuff, right? And then we're going into sprint development, and then I'm doing A skip, B skip, 20 meters, and then I'm doing acceleration work. That alone takes like an hour.
It's a load of work. And the thing is it does matter, because it does create relative strength. And I mean, that's a task. I mean, that in itself is a lot more work than what most people are going to do in general, period. I mean,
my athletes complain about it sometimes. I've had to lower it down because they get
and I'll say that even over the years, I've changed my warm-ups. There's not a single thing that I do that's exactly verbatim the way that I did it at K-State. Because I've changed my own things. I have my fingerprint on everything. I have the way that I see it. And I've done it too. I mean, the thing is I have done everything that's in my binder. I have literally done it. And,
that's why I still train every day.
And exactly. And, and flow matters, the flow of the workout, the flow of the warm up, whatever. I think that it matters. One of the things that Vern Gambetta, has long said is, a lot of coaches just do stuff, and I actually, that's actually my Instagram, which I'm not a big social media person by any stretch.
After this, Pat, you might end up
hey, if it helps, it helps, but it's not something, it's just not something that, again, I'm in that gray area. I'm 45. So I'm in kind of that area of like, well, I knew what time was before social media, and well, now it's kind of a big deal, but no, it's a thing that, going back to the flow of the warm up and everything. I've changed everything. I have the way I like things to basically go from one thing to another almost seamlessly. And going back to what Vern was saying, stuff, my Instagram handle is just stuff by Pat. And that's actually a joke in support of what Vern would say. A lot of coaches just do stuff. Right. And I've always found that really funny because it's true. I mean, it's a deal of like, hey, we can have a giant toolbox full of tools, but really at the end of the day, those tools, if they're just sitting there and it's just all mixed together, that's just stuff. Now you have to know how to use that tool, and a lot of us use different tools for the same purpose, and that is fine. And some people don't use certain tools for a purpose, and some people do use certain tools for a purpose. So no, I mean, it's a deal of don't just be doing stuff. Everything has to make sense. And at the end of the day, once you go through the warm up, you're going to find that was total body. You have gone from basically your homeostasis, whatever that may be. And now all of a sudden, you put in 30, 40, 50, 1 hour of work, it's work. You're going to get stronger from that. Now, again, if we're short approach jumpers or throwers, to me, throwers and jumpers are actually very, very similar.
Yeah, I agree. I tell Isaiah he's like a shot putter.
Exactly. And I mean, it's a deal of like, there's a lot of similarities there. And you see throwers, really, really good throwers can actually jump very well.
I've seen at Duke, there was a guy named Ben, and he could, off 2 feet, he could go over 6 feet. He could dive over it. And he was a shot putter. He weighed like 220. It was amazing.
Exactly. And I mean, it's the whole thing. We've probably seen the videos of Ryan Krauser dunking. Now, Ryan's a big guy too. I mean, he's 6'5", almost 6'6", but I've seen some guys that are 6'2", 6'3" throwers that just produce a massive amount of force very, very fast, and they get off the ground and
especially 2 foot. Specifically, obviously 2 foot.
2 foot. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, 1 foot. So, I don't see a lot of good.
Yeah, I don't see as much of that. Yeah, they're just simply too big. Yeah, but it's all very, very structured. And there's a rhyme and a reason for everything. So hey, we get very fit. But that's where we start. On day one of say the fall training, day one is going to be a warm up that's probably going to take 20 to maybe 30 minutes, and it depends too if there's some teaching going on in that. But then we're going to have some basic med ball throws, and all that stuff. We're not, there's nothing new in any of it. It's just really all a matter of how you, as a chef, how you put the ingredients in, how you mix it, how you cook it, and ultimately what ends up coming out.
Right.
So hey, there's nothing. Again, this kind of goes back to, the younger generations maybe knowing where a lot of the stuff came from. Hey, the stuff from Dan Path and where they got that, they got a lot of that stuff, from some of the Soviet literature, some of the East German literature and stuff like that. There are literally generations. Absolutely.
That's the stuff I go back and read.
Coaches. Exactly.
I got science. And I got right here. I'll just keep this son of a bitch. Anatoly Bondarchuk. I leave that right there on my my side table. That's what I read in my free time.
No, exactly. And you go back and you read some of that stuff and you just go, holy moly, like, look, these guys weren't dumb, or these people weren't dumb, those generations were not dumb by any stretch. And you realize, how full of gold that a lot of that stuff is. And there's reasons why, hey, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why, but you know what? People were jumping really high and were jumping a long way, a long time ago.
Yep.
So, I mean, there were good things that were going on. I think coaches' education today is a lot better and a lot deeper than it's been, but I don't want to say better. I mean, just deeper. I don't know.
I think there's more. The way I see it now is there's more.
Yeah.
But it's less filtered. And
yeah.
Everyone has their own opinion. Everyone has their own lens. And then when you get to the tippy top, you'll see everyone's kind of doing the same stuff the same way. Like what do they call it? Regression to the mean. It's like, you look at what Cliff is doing, what you're doing, what I'm doing with 1 foot jump, and what we're realizing more and more. And it's like, you start to realize who knows their shit and who doesn't, you know what I mean? And then you start to see, and you'll still see people that are successful that don't know shit about shit. And then, I see it all the time and I get really upset about it. I'm like, this is stupid. And I do my best to combat it without being a hater. But, everyone's going to call you a hater. I got called a hater like 10 minutes ago by someone that I got pissed off and I with the other day. Also, you can see
It
that in the group
happens.
chat. But
I saw it. I
just makes me
I avoid the drama. I just
you love it.
I think it's funny to watch.
It is. Yeah. So, anyways, that all said, you know, getting back to this.
But going back to the whole
getting
volume
back
thing,
is less volume more. When you're a
it
jumper,
depends. It
I have
depends.
found
Go ahead.
that less is more with high jumpers.
Yeah,
and I know
absolutely.
you mentioned that with Shelby, you guys jumped maybe 6 times. So I'm going to share a quick anecdote to this because I've found this to be the case. When I was training with Mike, and even after that, I maybe went over the bar 3 or 4 times, and that was some of the best I've ever high jumped. Was more approaches, more training, less actual high jump. Not even necessarily dunking. I always viewed it like I view jumping off one foot like a nuclear bomb in terms of the stimulus, specifically for high jumpers. Like dunking, we can get away with jumping a lot more, and it's kind of far and few between, and you can get away with like taking caffeine and being fine. And some guys, you know, they can jump more and they're fine or whatever else. But high jump, where the ground contact time and the forces have to be very, very specific to succeed. You cannot be flat whatsoever. So I found that a lot of guys, they overtrain, they overjump, they overdo plyos. Let me say this again, close to when they need to be jumping high. And then they end up fucking themselves in the season because they can't recover from all that specific stimuli. And then they're screwed, right? And so with guys, what I'll do is I will tell them, do nothing for a week. Do absolutely nothing. Like after the season's over, I'm like, let's run a little test here. Okay. I want you to don't jump, don't train, don't do anything. And I want you to compare how you're jumping in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now. And let me know how you're jumping off one foot after taking completely off. And what I've consistently seen, and it's not all the time, but it does happen. Even when I have 2-foot jumpers, this will happen. The vertical just goes 1 week it's here, next week it's here, next week it's here, next week it's here. And they come back better than they've ever been, just essentially resting, recovering. Now, sometimes you got to put some like rehab type stuff in there for the patella or the Achilles or whatever. But like, and you know, do a warm up every once in a while or whatever, just to stay fresh. Day before, move around, you know, stuff like that. But by and large, their nervous system, how wired they feel, all that soreness dissipates, and they end up being super bouncy. So I did this, I sprained my ankle, didn't jump for 8 weeks, came back first day, PR'd my high jump by 2 inches, jumped 6'4". No one around, no adrenaline, nothing. The rest of the season, I maintained that for my junior year of high school, right? Would have been a great multi had I been able to have internal rotation and, maybe been a little faster. I wasn't that fast. So then I do it with my other athlete, Nick Ross. Same thing, takes a week off, complete week off, PRs his high jump. Last week, Fabian Delrid takes a week off, jumps 1 centimeter higher than he did. He was struggling at 214 and jumped 215 easy and got kicked off the track with half a warm up. He's jumping right now. I don't know how he's doing. I asked him if he would want to come on the podcast, but I don't know. Fabian, if you watch this, I'll be curious to see what's happening right now. But yeah, like I've consistently kind of seen that to be the case. So are you noticing something similar? Have you noticed something similar? Because it seems like you kind of do based on what I've talked to Jordy about, but I want to get your lens on it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I mean, obviously, pulling the volume away, it depends on if you're talking about a male or a female as well. But I mean, obviously, I think for the most part, we're talking about, male jumpers. But there is a difference. But yeah, I mean, hey, I mean, it's a deal of depending on what's taking place in the training. Hey, how far do you back off, and when do you see, that recovery, and when do you start to see, the desired results? I can tell you situations of, I mean, you know what, hey, obviously, some people took some time off and they came back and they were better than they had ever been. So is that the way that we peak athletes? I think it just depends. I mean, if it's obviously the very last meet of the season, well, hey, you know what?
The hell?
Yeah.
I mean,
why
that's
not?
the thing. I always wait until the end of the season, actually after the last meet, to test it. So then I'm like, okay, now I know when you're not jumping well, that your tolerance for volume is really low, really low. And for you to jump, like in Fabian's case, 230 or 233, you got to be really fresh. And I see it specifically with power jumpers a lot of the time, actually, because sometimes that's not the case. But I think that as a power jumper, you default to longer ground contact times to get lift. But the
Yeah,
problem is that usually interrupts rotation, in my experience, in high jump.
Yeah,
and so I guess, do you agree with that? Have you found that to be the case at all, that they're a little bit more volume averse?
I mean, it depends. Again, it depends.
Oh, there we go. You
Uh-oh.
cut out for a second.
got
Where
it?
did you say
Oh,
there?
okay. Yeah, no, I think it depends. I mean, and it depends on the jumper. I mean, somebody like Shelby, Shelby's a 6'2" guy, super elastic and very strong, very strong. I mean, we'll talk about that in a second. But I mean, he's an elastic guy. Somebody who's maybe a little bit bigger of a guy, maybe, maybe some of these guys that are 6'6" and 6'7", maybe they're gonna, I think that they're gonna respond to rest a little bit better. Somebody like Shelby's so elastic that, dude, he recovers pretty fast.
It's
and he's
crazy.
very fit.
Jordy's kind of well, actually, Jordy would get fatigued, actually, I think, right?
And fitness matters. Yes. Jordy's the kind of guy to me that would get a little bit fatigued. I think, in my opinion, I think Jordy has to be stimulated to really have that big bounce. Now that again, it depends. And this is where this opens up.
I'm glad
this opens up all sorts of it opens up all sorts of avenues that we can keep going on and probably never finish. But it depends on who the jumper is. Shelby, and again, fitness goes into this stuff. Okay. I know that hey, we can again open up all kinds of avenues in terms of what is fitness. But again, having a pretty high work capacity matters. Okay. Shelby is very fit. Shelby can do a lot of work over the course in 3 and 4 hours. Okay. A lot of work. Now, you say, well, he's a super elastic guy. Now, we take a lot of breaks in that too. We have a lot of really high powered stuff going on, and then we take big breaks, but we also too know that we have to be fit for 3 hours. Because from the time that you walk into the stadium, I don't want to get off here a little bit, but I'm just going to make this point. From the time that we walk into the stadium, start warming up, to the time that you go to the call room, to the time that they pull you out, you take a couple of warm-up jumps, you put down your mark, you get a few approaches, you take a few warm-up jumps. To the time that competition starts, the jumps that you take in competition, and then finally the competition wraps up, you're looking at over 3 hours. You have to be able to move for 3 hours. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff going on in all of that kind of goes into the way that we train. Work capacity does matter. So that goes into the big warm-ups, that goes into, but everything is very elastic. We're always trying to stay bouncy, and explosive for the most part. But yeah, I think some of the bigger guys are going to have a little bit more trouble with that. So I think if you really pull the volume off and they're going to recover, I mean, it's like Hamish Kerr last year. Hamish Kerr didn't make the final in Budapest, went and literally took 2 weeks off. And I think him and his girlfriend went on a vacation and literally went and sat on the beach somewhere and whatever for basically 2 weeks. And he showed up to a Diamond League meet in PRs.
I love it.
But then on the flip side of that, you look at what Shelby and I have been doing, and we've never gotten away from the work. Now, obviously, some of the volume went down going into,
So I almost view that as more traditional, what I would expect, right? Like
that's
a
more
lot of shit, and then like you drop volume 50%,
and then you drop volume, and I'm always counting days. I'm looking at days. Basically, the way that I write my training is basically it's almost like a 4-week calendar. Hey, it's kind of the mod high low, or something of that. And sometimes the weeks change in that, whatever, depending on what is coming up and what's going to go on. But
I actually count. What I do is I count backwards from when the competition is.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay.
Exactly right.
They're like, when's your they'll tell me all these details. I'm like, okay, I don't give a shit about any of that. When's your competition? They're like, September 16th. I'm like, okay, then September. Let's say they've been training for a month. I'm like, you don't have a lot of fatigue built up. 4 days prior to that, well, I think I said the 16th. So yeah, around the 10th or 12th, I'm looking to cut volume down a lot. And sometimes in windows of opportunity, I'm sure you do something similar, based on what you said, where it's like, look, Shelby now coming off the Olympics, you got back 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago or something like that. He's got to meet the 17th. It's like, okay,
the 14th,
let's build up
14th of,
yeah,
we had 1 month. We knew that we
so
had
you're like,
1
okay,
month.
maybe we'll hit it hard. Let them recover after the meet, hit it hard for a week or two, and then
and start to drop it off, and that's exactly right. Yeah, and so I'll look at it as 4 days out, 7 days out, 10 days out, 21 days out, 28 days out. Pretty basic. And I know that there are basically certain parameters that I want to be at those days. There's certain things that that I want to see. And that's too getting to know the athlete better and better, and kind of understanding what kind of stimulus do they respond to, and how long does it take them? How long does it take them to recover? I mean, it's
So what is one of the biggest metrics you look at to say, yeah, you're really fatigued or you're not, and like let's use a depth jump session. You do a depth jump session, really, shock loading. I think a lot of people underestimate how intense it is. A lot of people are like plyos. I'm like, dude, plyos are intense, like really intense. And if you do a lot of them, you can really bury yourself quite quickly and really crush your performance, in 1 foot jumping. I see it all the time. My jumping goes to shit when I start hitting a lot of plyos. I did 1,000 contacts in February. I probably still have taken quite a long time to recover from that.
Yeah.
And I was just testing. I was testing, trying things. So my first question is, how much would you say, how much plyo volume do you do?
Yeah.
And when do you do it? Would be the second. And then how do you know when they're recovered? So let me, I'm going to list these out.
Yeah.
When do you do it? And how do you know when they are recovered? If you can answer those 3 questions, I'll be curious, because I know, a lot of coaches in my space, and I mean our space, they love to hammer plyos for 1 foot jumpers.
Yeah.
And I want to know what your lens is on it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. You mentioned depth drops a minute ago too. Well, I'm going to say this real quick. A depth drop is when you're coming down off of a dunk.
Yeah, I do 100%. I tell my guys that all the time. So let's say a depth jump. Let's say a depth jump.
Yeah, a depth jump. Okay, and okay, we don't do many depth jumps per se. We don't really drop off the box and rebound off of it. But okay, so now let me go back and answer the question about plyos, because I think that's gonna maybe cover it a little bit. Okay, for 1 foot jumpers, if you're a horizontal jumper, I get the basic, repeat, right, left, stuff like that. I get it. For single one-off jumpers like a high jumper, okay, I don't see it. That doesn't mean that we're not going to do a little bit of that. We do maybe a little bit of it, but I don't think Shelby's done any of that this year. If I'd have to go
single
back,
leg repeat hopping.
No, we've done no single leg repeat stuff.
What's crazy is you look at Ilya Ivanuk and you look at some of these Russians, and they're just like over hurdles, single leg hurdle hop. I'm like, holy shit.
And they do, and I do think that there is something to be said to all of that, and I'll get to that in just a second too, because the adaptation becomes a big part of that. So
I'm listening. Okay. I want to go grab my phone real quick.
No worries. So again, okay, let's bring back Shelby's nature. At 17 years old, Shelby had that dunk from behind the free throw line. Okay, Shelby, I can tell you right now, just from talking to him, and he wasn't doing any sort of specialized jumping routine. That was there. That's wired in him by his nature. Okay,
he dunked a lot. That was it.
He dunked a lot. He played basketball. A lot. So and I've always based high jumping off of like street ballers. My own anecdotal experience as a basketball player growing up, and a baseball player, like I had mentioned earlier, but basketball was also a big one for me. Michael Jordan was like the guy, right? You can see it on my hat, right? It's a deal of no, we don't do any kind of standard plyo routines per se, not necessarily for high jumpers. So no, we jump on the basketball court. And that kind of goes back to some of the stuff that you were talking about earlier about volume of jumping. we jump on the basketball court. We have a lot of fun with it. And, we're not playing pickup games, and it's basically Shelby has a ball in his hand. I may have a ball in my hand, whatever. And we're just shooting around, and we shoot around for 15, 20 minutes, and we're having fun with it. If he goes up for a dunk, he does. There's a time and a place for a hard dunk. And that is something that we actually write it into the training that way. So you know what, I don't mind 2-foot jumps, hey, a jump shot's a 2-foot jump. You know what, if you come in and you know what, maybe we're getting a little bit acrobatic, a little bit creative. I think that there's strength. You're kind of covering all kind of perspectives, really. There's strength there. There's good elastic work that's going on. There's a little bit of neural work that's going on. There's obviously eccentric and concentric, contractions taking place, and some isometric stuff too. I mean, if you're going between the legs, and you're getting creative and you're working on basically your skill, there is some isometric work going on there. So I don't see that as a negative. I don't see that as bad. So we actually do a lot of that. So we're on the basketball court probably 2 to 3 days a week. It's not necessarily extensive unless I write it in as extensive. And usually that's going to be after a lifting session. So we'll be on the basketball court for maybe 15, 20 minutes of what I call easy basketball. And that's just kind of getting warmed up. And then we head into the weight room, and we may do a little bit of a little bit more warm up, which is a little bit more mobility oriented. And it'll be some kind of circuit, and then we're lifting. And you know what? And the lifting is it's going to be, say, some cleans from the ground. Even though Shelby is 6'2" and very long and very elastic guy, he's actually a very good Olympic lifter, and he pushes through the ground very, very well. So all year long, we have been cleaning from the ground. We haven't cleaned from any boxes, and don't I know that you do, and it looks great.
No.
That's
awesome.
That's
mostly my hips. I would love to.
We're staying, and Shelby is pretty mobile.
I was going to ask what his max is.
What's his max? We haven't one-offed, but probably from the ground, 235, 240 from the ground. Now he's throwing 205 with speed. I mean, to where it just bounced, and it basically wanted to bounce off his chest when he caught it. I mean, he pulled it so high, and there was so much speed on it. So, and that was 10 days out from the qualifying round.
And he's about 165.
He's 157, 158.
157.
Yeah, he's 6'2", 157. And so, okay, so now let's come back in. Even though I know that we're talking about plyos just a little bit, but I'm going to try to. I'm going to try to connect all of this, and I think this is going to answer some of the plyo stuff. So we're cleaning from the ground, and we're not using any kind of VBT. I'm not necessarily going off percentage. I'm going off of my eyes, and I'm going off of what he's saying too as well. So there is some kind of self-perceived, regulation going on there, if you will. I'm, kind of listening to him, but I'm also seeing what it is that I'm seeing as well. So yeah, I mean, hey, he's lifting heavy and lifting fast. And the other one is quarter squats. Earlier in the year, we'll do some reverse lunges where we're getting down at 90-degree hip angles and 90-degree, or maybe a little bit more than 90 degrees at the knee. And that's going to be our lower type axial loaded stuff. I don't think we have not done we have not done a basic squat. It's all been either reverse lunges, or it's been quarter squats, or sixth or eighth, or whatever you want, whatever, a partial squat. So he cleans from the ground. Okay, so he's pushing from pretty high angles, from pretty low hips and pretty high angles, or low angles, I should say. And so he pushes from the ground, and then anything ultra heavy, we're basically doing in a quarter squat. Okay, and
what's the heaviest he's reverse lunged?
For him, I think he's been up. That's a great question. Inika's the one. But for him, being in my system now for basically 2 seasons, I think he's maybe been up maybe around 185. Okay, and that's for like 3. So that would be a set of 6. That would be alternating reverse lunge. So that would be 3 per leg. Now, Inika is, again, wired unlike anybody I've ever seen. and she's 115 pounds, and I have video of her with 205 on her back doing it. No problem. Like no problem at all. Getting down parallel with 205, but she's been 230. She's been 2 times body weight. She has done reverse lunges, 2 parallel with 2 times body weight on her back.
So would you say that some of your favorite movements are going to be quarter squat, cleans from the floor?
Yeah,
those, you know what's crazy?
Yeah, and I need to never clean. And here's the thing with go ahead.
When I've jumped extremely high, I do a lot of reverse lunges. I've gotten away from them because sometimes they can really piss my back off. Yeah. But I really, really like them. I don't know why I like them so. I mean, it loads my hip a lot, loads my adductor a lot. Yeah. You know, you get some load on the rear leg when it touches down. And you know, you kind of hit some different positions. But
the pelvis, what's happening with the pelvis is different than what's happening in a deeper back squat, where we're, you know, posteriorly we're pushing the butt way out, right? With a big anterior pelvic tilt, right? Whereas like in a reverse lunge, the pelvis is staying almost in a closer position to where we're going to be in a single leg.
It's more neutral.
You know, that's right. That's right.
You know, I've gone pretty heavy. I've done 110 for 2 on each leg, 110 kilos. Sorry. So that's 2. What is that, like 235, 245?
Yeah, 240, almost 240. Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, and I've really seen that to be the case. You know, I think too, a big lift for us that I really like personally, well, 2 lifts for the hip, RDLs. I really freaking love RDLs. I found that when my RDL is really good, I think it kind of helps my clean, and then it also really helps, you know, just my hips. And then hip thrust I've found to be really, really good as well for a lot of 1 foot jumpers. I don't.
And hip thrust really, I mean, pushing off the penultimate and pushing in, pushing.
You know what's so crazy?
Absolutely.
Isaiah will literally say the same thing. He's like, a single leg hip thrust fast feels identical to my penultimate step off 2 feet. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. Like for 1 foot, I don't have crazy hip mobility, so I don't push crazy hard off that step. You know, but I do think there's something to that. Real quick question: yes or no? Do you cue pushing off the penultimate step hard?
I mean, I don't necessarily. I don't really cue it too awfully much. And look, the thing is, Shelby does a pretty good job of being flat, landing on the ball of the foot, and pushing through it. Really, if anything, I just cue more firing the takeoff, because if it's a thing of fire the takeoff, you know what, it's going to be pretty active off the penultimate.
And you're saying when you say fire the takeoff, you mean just rhythm?
Just freaking just fire that thing and be just ultra rigid, ultra stiff, and bounce off the ground. Cool. As opposed to just being passive. Sometimes some athletes are a little bit passive, and that may have been some of that what you were talking about into the ball of the foot too. You know, they may be actually surprisingly passive into it. But if you're, you know, I think if you're really firing the takeoff, number one, you're creating some contraction there and some rigidity there that hopefully you're going to bounce out of, right? But no, I found that, you know, kind of cueing a little bit more of an active takeoff, or fire the takeoff, as like Cliff Revelto would say. You know, I think that creates a fairly more active penultimate as well. Now, there's some athletes like Anika and Jerron Robinson that, man, they healed the penultimate big time. They would roll over a full heel and then they would lower and get right into it. And I didn't find that cueing a flat penultimate and pushing, I didn't think that was very productive for them. It was probably counterproductive. And I know that, you know, one of the athletes had gone to another coach later in her career, and they really worked on a flatter penultimate, and that stood her hips way up, and it just wasn't.
You know, I was always taught rolling, you know, early on, and you know, both the penultimate and the plant. But more and more, I'm like, whatever feels natural to you, it doesn't really matter. Just do what is natural to you, and if you emphasize lift, you're probably going to line things up pretty well, you know.
Especially
with basketball players, that happens all the time. Like
that's exactly
and
right.
Dunking is like, you know, as much as kind of the differences that we covered earlier and some of the stuff that I think can happen when you dunk too often, I think you can kind of default towards longer ground contact times. Maybe there's some other stuff that might happen if you do a little bit too much of it. You know, I do think that it sets you up for a lot of success in 1 foot jumping. And then, you know, even just as a kid, you go high jump a lot, like it's going to teach you. That's when my jumping off 1 foot went up the most, is when I just started high jumping a lot. Because specificity.
I mean, it was the deal. The influence, I'll say this with that being said. I mean, my jumping influence was literally Michael Jordan. And it was literally come fly with me. Yeah, I mean, it was a deal of, we're talking nearly 35 years ago now, but back in literally 1990, okay? And I mean, we had VHS video cassettes and all that stuff and whatever. And we didn't have a phone. We didn't have, a tablet that we could go out, and we could sit there and watch it and then put ourselves in that position right there. No, you literally had to pause the video, stop the video, whatever, walk out of your house, go to the basketball court and bring up in the mental hard drive, what it was that you saw, the positions that you analyzed, and you were trying to get into those positions. And, so I think I think from a coach perspective, that was very influential. But from a jumping perspective, I think it was huge because, I mean, it's the deal of like, I know you've made some videos and talked about it. Dunking on low rims. I had an 8-foot rim. That's what I had at 10, 11, 12 years old was an 8-foot rim. And then Shaq came along. And so then I tore it down and then ended up getting, whatever for my birthday or whatever, ended up getting an adjustable goal. And that was awesome because then I'm growing, I'm getting older, but I'm still able to try to do the things that I saw Michael Jordan doing. Mm-hmm. And, that was very influential. So I'm jumping off 1, I'm jumping off 2, I'm getting very creative. I think that helped with coordination, and things like that. But I was always fairly coordinated, but no, that was very instrumental, was trying to recreate the things that I was seeing on video and then, carrying them over myself to the basketball court. And yeah.
I love just even pulling my jumps up to someone else's and just frame by frame going to touchdown, mid support, toe off, etc.
Yeah. Look at what's going on.
I think it just is so insightful. The thing that sometimes can be misleading is when you don't have velocity metrics, because you can hit the same positions, but if you're not at the same momentum, it's not the same.
That's exactly right.
So you have to watch it in full speed and kind of see the rhythm and see the momentum and see you cover space or not cover space, and then start to make some inferences about what that may or may not mean. But back to this plow thing. So you don't do hopping off 1 foot.
We don't do not much.
Not much
at
do a
all.
lot of you play basketball because you were talking about the weight room. So you guys will go in as a warm up, and then also you said you'll come back at the end of after the weight room. And you'll do some stuff 2-3 days.
And so we'll actually use we'll do the lifts that we're going to do, whatever it is that day, and we lift usually about twice a week. That doesn't mean that we don't have weights in our hands maybe 3 or even 4 times a week, but I would say that the actual lifting itself, what would be considered true lifting, is 2 times a week. And I mean, sometimes we'll come back. I know that there's only going to be a few jumps that may be worth a shit, or whatever, but I know going in what to expect, and there's a reason why we're doing everything. And and sometimes it's just like, hey, I mean, Shelby, or whoever it may be, they're just ultra stimulated from the lifting, and it's like right now is the time to just go frickin' just let it rip and dunk really, really hard.
I get flat as fuck after a lift.
Okay.
So flat. If I tried to jump after a lift, 2 things would happen. One, I've partially torn my patella, so I have a hard time. This is where we were talking about individuality. Mm-hmm. No way I'd be able to do that. A lot of my athletes can't do that. But what I've noticed is my light athletes, my athletes who weigh under 160 pounds, they can all day, they can jump and they can do that.
Yeah. And that's very, very much like Shelby. Yeah.
And then 2, the athletes that don't have pre-existing issues, they also can do that. And I think Shelby, having a background in basketball, he probably he likes the court probably quite a bit. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of my guys are the same way. They just aren't. They're not in the same way in that they're jumping 7'9", but
they love to jump.
They love to jump, and I think most of my guys are pushing pretty hard. I do a lot of squatting. We do a lot of lifting. We do a lot of the RDLs, posterior chain work and stuff like that. But it's really interesting to hear, kind of your lens on getting back into the court after the weight room. Because I think a lot of the time, we just wouldn't want to, like most of my guys would not want to do that. They also don't have 4 hours in the day.
Right.
Dedicated to training.
What I mean? And that's right. I mean, no, that's exactly right. And I think a lot of times, a lot of people are very, they're constrained for time. For sure. And, so again, it all goes in, it depends. I mean, that really 100%. Is a word that.
It really does. It's just interesting because I've never heard your lens on it. I mean, I've heard it from Jordan's point of view, and now, kind of hearing, the truth. Jordan Westner, you fucking liar. No, I'm kidding. Hearing some of this stuff is like, oh wow, that's like really kind of enlightening. And really interesting to hear your lens on it. So then,
and back like when Jordy, when I was coaching him at Memphis, things like approaches with the takeoff, the bar, there were times that we would put the bar at maybe like 4 or 4.5 feet. It's basically just it's just a really high hurdle at that, but still that is a jump. If you're running the
100%.
approach and you pop off the ground and your hips get up to, whatever they get up to, but obviously, you're basically hurdling that is a jump off the ground. So that is a ground
100%.
contact, and that kind of goes back into some of the things that I was talking about in terms of fitness, what is fitness in terms of jump fitness? Hey, I mean, if you do 4 sets of 3 of that, if you run your approach, you pop off, you walk back, you run your approach and you pop off, and you walk back and you run your approach and you pop off, and then you take, say 3 or 4 minutes break,
do it again,
and then you come back and you do it again, all of a sudden there's 12 takeoffs. That's 12 jumps right there. Now, we didn't lay out and we didn't get over the ground. Maybe the forces were not quite as high as if you were trying to jump, 220, 225 or something like that or whatever. But still, again, from a conditioning perspective, and it just depends, but from a conditioning perspective, that's pretty, in my opinion, that's really effective.
No, I agree. Especially if the intent's high, which it should be. If you're basically trying to straight leg jump 4 feet, 48 inches, trying to get 48 inches displacement.
And intent is a word I know that you've used, and I know that that's a word that I think more and more people are starting to understand is intent. I mean, again, if you're on the basketball court or if you're popping off in approach runs or whatever, there is an intent there that is very similar, maybe not quite as high, but again, it goes back to that foundation of fitness. On day one, we're not going to walk into the gym and go, okay, I'm going to windmill dunk here and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do things I've never done. You by instinct, that, hey, you know what, here in 3 months, this is what I want to be doing. But by instinct that you're not going to be able to just jump out of the gym that day, and if you do, it's because of the whole, you've taken some break and whatever. And
or you're just feeling good and whatever,
you're feeling good and you're just loaded with, you're loaded with type 2X because you haven't done a damn thing for whatever and whatever. But you know what? But you're not going to do very many of them. There's only going to be a couple of jumps. The next thing you know, you're going to be freaking gassed. You're going to be, okay, I'm done and I'm shot, and you're going to be really sore for the next several days. Right. But again, that goes back into how do you develop fitness and how do you get athletes, prepared to show up on a certain day and jump the highest that they've ever jumped. There are periods in that, and there is context in all of it. And, and those are 2 words I think that matter. It depends and context. 100%. Those are two words that really matter in everything, because it depends on a lot of things, and there's context in a lot of things in a lot of different ways.
So here's a question related to this that does give you context: is how do you know when they're flat and when they're recovered? What are some of the metrics that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, and again, kind of knowing the athlete, kind of, questioning them always, I mean, probably one thing that I ask probably too much is, how are you feeling?
I ask all the time.
Exactly. And, and then sometimes you have to be like, I know I've asked this question now a lot, but, how are you feeling? Doubling back on it or whatever. But, and also too, you with the coaching eye, you just have to know, you have to know what you're seeing. And I think that there are metrics. There are metrics and you develop some metrics for that athlete. Sometimes it's in the lifting. Sometimes it's just in the things. And 2, as a coach, you should know going into the session. I mean, you should just know, I mean, if 48 hours earlier, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours or whatever, if you throttled them, if they work their butt off, you just know, I mean, it's the whole thing of like, I pretty much know how Shelby's going to be feeling following a certain workout. It's like, okay, we have to have 72 hours before we're going to be any sort of ready to rock.
Productive.
Anything productive, and so, So no, again, there's context in all of it. It depends. And you should just have a general idea. But I think too, we've worked together now enough. There are times that I can tell, and you can just tell from the lifting. I mean,
body
I can tell
language,
you
the bars
the
moving
body
slow.
language and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there in the preceding, when we got to Paris, and then at 10 days out and at 7 days out, like I knew. You just know from the lifting, what's going on. Plus, you have the recovery, the rest and recovery that's taken place in between, and the volumes have dropped way off at that point anyway.
Like, you should be able to predict at that point. I do the same thing with Isaiah. I'm like, dude, you're gassed right now. And sometimes he'll come in and he thinks he feels really good. And I always tell my guys, it's not a matter of is this good or is it bad? It's a matter of this is data and I can use this data to help me in the future. Yeah. That's always how I view things. Like, absolutely. I just got Fabian's update and he's like, I jumped like shit. I only cleared 210. It wasn't good. And I'm looking at the jumps and I'm like, okay, I want to get some more information about this. So you finish the season. A week later, you jump better in practice. Mm-hmm. Today, you don't jump well at all. You had completely off. So now that's telling me 7 days is good. 14 days is too much. What happens at 21 days of nothing, right? Because we're going to get back into he's going to start training probably in next week. We're going to start getting after it again. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, let's take one more week. And if you are now jumping, if you do it once is luck, twice is whatever the saying is, it's like, do it again. Yeah. Okay. Did you still jump bad? Or did you jump 220? And it's like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, you just had an off day probably last week, and now you're actually completely fresh. And this is your baseline. So we know if I'm seeing you in season drop from, 210, or let's say you go from 210 to 215 to whatever off a full approach, not a short, but a full approach. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, that's pretty telling that you're really, either really fatigued or really fresh. You're responding to a stimulus, like, or you're looking at bar speeds and you're kind of seeing stuff like that's kind of what that stuff means to me, because right. And it's interesting too, when you look at positions of athletes in high jump specifically and what they're doing when they feel good versus when they don't feel good. Because sometimes it's like, maybe you were feeling great, but you're just fucking up the drive leg, the free leg coming away from the bar. Like that's enough to lose 5 to 10 centimeters on a jump. Yeah. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how much height you have. You're not going to, or you look at guys and they're crunching over the bar. They're just not holding the top position at all. And you're like, dude, this should not be difficult for you. Just hold that top position. Like, what are you doing? Just be patient. When guys don't understand, I'm like, how do you not understand? This is like, to me, so easy to do. And it's like hard sometimes to get guys to understand. I'll tell guys, pull the bar off with your heels. Like if you pull the bar off with your heels and then they're like, oh, I'm going to hit the bar. And then all of a sudden they'll have like perfect top position. Or I'll tell guys when they sit over the bar, I'm like, pull your heels to your butt. We're over the bar, pull your heels to your butt. And all of a sudden it looks like a hip thrust. And I'm like, oh, would you look at that? Now you have the correct top position. Sometimes the next jump, other things go to shit. I'm sure you've seen that, and it's making that consistent. But yeah, that's always how I view it, is like gathering data. You look at everything. You look at the warm up. You look at the depth jumps. You look at the basketball, whatever. In your case, you look at the power cleans. You look at the quarter squats, and you're like, okay, you got, in Shelby's case, let's say it's 405 on the bar. He can do what, like 475 or something in a quarter squat, or over 500?
No. He's had 530 pounds on his back.
Yeah, exactly.
At 157 body weight. He's been.
I don't know how his back doesn't snap, Pat.
No, he's but and that's another thing, and that goes back into strength and what's core strength. And I know that you talked about that the other day. Well, it matters. It absolutely matters. It absolutely matters. But no, there's reasons why, and he can handle that amount of weight, but there's reasons why we do it. And it in my opinion, it helps a ton. But
how much of the year are you quarter squatting, would you say?
Well, we've quarter squatted a lot of the season. Actually, I'll tell you what. Actually, do you want to come back on this question here and just
I will. Let me get my dog. Let me get my dog in here. What were you gonna say?
And I'm gonna run to the pisser real quick.
Let me pause this.
For sure.
We'll do like 5-10 more minutes and then we'll close.
Yeah, no. That's fine. And the thing is I know
back. All right. So after a short break, we're back again. So Patric, last question I want to go over is quarter squatting versus deep squatting. You said Shelby can do 530 at 157, which is like, how many
About
times body weight is that?
It's about 3.3. Yeah.
3.3 times body, which is crazy. Yeah. Okay. So how much of the year do you quarter squat, and do you really ever deep squat? I think you said no, not really.
Yeah. So no, I mean, we don't really deep squat, but we do get into deeper positions just in single leg, like reverse lunges. So, and I'm looking at shin angle in that too, make sure that they're not going too far back and putting too much weight on the back leg, and taking off maybe some of the quad, maybe adaptations that I'd like to see in the little bit deeper, reverse lunge and stuff like that.
You just like the knee kind of in line with the front of the foot?
Yeah. Maybe just slightly over the toe, maybe just a little bit of shin angle, but not too, I'm not looking for necessarily excessive, I mean, they are going to lean back just slightly, especially too, as the weight on the bar goes up. I mean, it's just, I think by nature, you're going to see that. So, but no, I mean, but there's reasons why that we do that. I again, like in a, like in a standard deep squat, I think there's some things going on with the pelvis that we don't necessarily, that we don't see going on in one leg jumping, or sprinting or stuff like that. So, anyways, those are just my own kind of ideas on that. And I think too, athletes like Shelby, who has a really, really long femur, I think it's just, I think obviously it's just, it's a little bit better for him and a little bit easier for him to get into those deeper positions. But that's something that we definitely do earlier, and we do that in the fall or in the winter, leading into the indoor season. And then from there, we pretty much stay anything deep is just a clean from the ground. And then we start with quarter squats. I think the first quarters that he had this year were kind of in the maybe the third week of January.
So you're really leaning into indoor, and then
into the indoor season. That's right. And he jumped 233 on February 10th. So he matched his lifetime best, which was an indoor PR for him. His indoor PR was 231. His outdoor PR was 233 at the time. And so he had an indoor personal best and matched his outdoor lifetime best. So that was in February. So that was about 3 weeks out.
Okay.
And then we just tried
that for the indoor season, or do you back off?
Yeah, and a little bit. So I think there after the indoor season, after World Indoor Championships, I think there was about a 3 or 4 week period there, which is very, very general and whatever. I know that he had taken almost 10 days basically off, to be honest. He had gone home and, hey, he's going to do some stuff at home, may go out to the track and do a warm up or something or whatever. But really it's kind of 10 days of just of that would be what we would just call stuff. Just kind of, hey, go do whatever you feel like, and then we came back, and then, basically through April, we kind of just start getting back to, we're not going back necessarily to general prep. It probably is something that's more along the lines of more of kind of a special prep. We've already had some loads. We're not that far away from stuff. We can pick some stuff up pretty quick. And so, we're not going in just general training and stuff like this. No, we're getting sharp again, but most of the outdoor season, I would say, would almost look like really maintenance in a lot of ways, except for that very kind of first period there in late March and April. But a lot of things, like that's where the days very, very, very much become, critical. How many days are we out from a certain meet? How many days are we away from doing something in terms of like maybe a quarter squat or in terms of a heavy clean or something like that. And next thing you know, we're going through the outdoor season and just keeping everything alive. I mean, and hey, when we have a chance to get in some really, really high neural stimulus, we're definitely doing that. But again, we're keeping in mind how far away we are from anything. But but yeah, in terms of like anything deep, that stuff is early on. And what we do keep deep is a clean from the ground. We've kept that in the entire year. He just cleaned yesterday from the ground. We have a couple of weeks left on the season, and it was a moderate weight. We got up to maybe, I think, what did we get up to? 185. He popped 185, I think, for 3. And but I know that going into say next week, I know that he's going to pop probably 205 for one with some big speed. Well, 10 days out when he went 236, 10 days out, he popped 205 with big speed. So,
Yeah.
Hey, if we're again, that kind of goes back into some of those things, when somebody's ready. There are just certain metrics that you're looking at. There's just a barometer. You just know that when I see those kinds of speeds at that kind of weight, from that particular athlete, to me, they're ready to rock and roll. And that's what it's been all season long.
Right. It's kind of interesting for me. It's more like when I know when 2, 3, maybe even 4 days out before a dunk session, my knees feel really good. And I'm starting to feel like no soreness at all. I'm like in my muscles at all. And I've done some heavy calf raises, some heavy RDLs.
Yeah.
I've hit some squats here or there after building up a lot of general volume and fitness through the year. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to jump really fucking high.
Yeah.
Like I can even tell tomorrow I'm going to UCF with an athlete, Nasir, and I'm like pretty damn sure that I'm going to jump fairly high if my timing and rhythm is on. Because there's a lot of like stuff that goes into throwing lobs and stuff like that. And I'm sure, Shelby is probably a supernatural at that, but I sometimes struggle with it. I was gonna see if Fabian. So yeah, I think we're at the 2 hour 5 minute mark. I definitely am gonna. This will not be the last time we have you on the podcast.
I appreciate
You're gonna
it.
get a lot of people follow you and on Instagram and stuff like that. You're gonna be
I'm okay with that. I don't post a whole lot, but it'll probably make me post a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe it'll give you some incentive to actually start sharing some content, because I would love to see more of what you guys do. I always love seeing anything that elite high jump coaches are doing. It's just to create some context of like, oh, this is really interesting, and like I always have to go to the athlete because it's hard to get a hold of some of you old geezers on like Rolf. Like Rolf's like 60 some, and like getting a hold of him is impossible.
He's that generation.
Yeah,
he's that generation ahead of me.
Randy and him. Like, so it's now I'm 31 and I'm like, people are asking me to be on podcasts. I'm like, I don't really want to. Now I understand why they don't want to do it.
and the thing is, John, I mean, I think you have enough knowledge and you understand at 31, like you can literally be better than ever. And, I mean, it is the thing, you can be better than ever in your mid 30s. I mean, at 36, basically at 36 years old, and I have the DEXA data to prove it. And I know that what I was doing, I really probably was actually the fastest that I had, and maybe like by body weight, maybe power to weight ratio and stuff like that. Actually, at 35 and 36 years old, I was the best I'd ever been.
That is exactly what I am aiming for. Actually, what's so interesting, Pat, we actually have Fabian here, who's a 233 jumper. He just got done with practice.
I remember.
I'm gonna have him join because I actually
that's cool.
We'll keep I'm gonna outro the podcast. If you guys are still listening to this point, you're a trooper. You are a diehard fan. You're the type of person that I love to coach. So kudos to you. Hats off to you. I'm going to let Fabian in now, who's a Swedish high jumper. He jumps his PR is 233. He just finished up practice. We mentioned him earlier in the podcast. And I know he has some questions for Pat. I'd be curious to hear this conversation as well. So Fabian, you can say hello to Pat. Pat, this is Fabian.
Hey, Fab.
So what happened out there on the track?
I don't know exactly what you've been talking about.
I saw you jump 210. I saw you had to move the mat, and you didn't flutter kick over the bar. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Did you feel flat today?
Yeah, I think so. Because last week, when I don't rest it for a week, I could really I felt way more like stiff and powerful at takeoff. But today I didn't really have that like stiffness or something.
Do you think maybe that if you had done something midweek, you would have felt a little bit better?
I guess
like moving around, doing something.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Maybe I just also had like a bad day, but
yeah. So I was telling Pat this. What I want to do is one more week, go out, do something in the middle of the week this time, right, or the day before. Yeah. Don't move the freaking mat before you go out and try to jump 215 or 220 for 25 minutes and see what happens. We have that data, and then we look at that data and we say, look, we know that if you get worse, that tells us, or it's the same, shit, you're not fatigued. You're now detraining, right? Yeah. And then we know 7 days is optimal for you, right? You need to drop off volume pretty freaking hard 7 days out from a competition. Now, if you get better, then that means that the volume that you did during the year was like you crushed yourself way more than you thought, probably, right? And then we know definitively. So that's my lens on it. Like I want to collect that data, and then September we're in it, right? You're back into training. But I know you had some questions for Pat about short approach, long approach, stuff like that. What was one of the questions that you had that you wanted to ask?
Well, I was just thinking, right, because what I felt for myself when I get in good shape up to those good heights, a full approach is often too much for me to handle in practice. Like I need to be pumped up.
Well, you're back. You cut off for a second there. Would you say full approach is what?
No, but I just meant to say, like, it's hard to get that adrenaline going enough during practice to perform well with full approach when I'm really in like good shape. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. So maybe like in season, just doing short approach and then saving like full approach for the meets.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And yeah, I think it depends on the jumper. I think it depends on who the athlete is. And I know some jumpers don't like jumping from full approach in practice. And I can understand that. It's hard. I mean, I jumped, at my best I was 205. I was a decathlete, but at my best I was 205. And I didn't really like jumping from a long approach in practice. And that kind of goes into some other things, some technical things that may be a discussion for another day. I question how far does the approach really need to be for a lot of athletes, but that can make some people mad. But again, I think that it depends. It depends on the athlete, and it depends on what all else you're doing. How old are you, Fabian?
I'm 27.
Okay, you're 27. You've high jumped. You know how to high jump, right? It's kind of a deal of like with Shelby. Shelby's 28 years old. Shelby knows how to high jump. Now, there are obviously little things that we talk about in the approach, some positional stuff, getting off the ground, rotating upward, some things that we do talk about a little bit. But for the most part, I try not to get overly technical with the athlete. If they have a history of high jumping, how to get over a bar.
Yeah.
Right. So my question is sometimes is, like with Shelby this year, and I know that this is something we didn't really talk about too in depth earlier in this podcast, but Shelby and I should say, we've only had 2 real practice high jump sessions this entire year. 2.
That's great.
And we started training.
I told him it was 6. I didn't know it was 2.
Well, no. It was, I think, 6 total jumps. It was 2 practice sessions.
Oh my
God. One of those sessions was 2 jumps, and the other session was 4 jumps.
So okay.
And so now this may blow you up in terms of some things. It may blow up your whole kind of thought process in what is high jump training. How do we actually train for high jump to be our best? Yeah. And John, if this is counter to anything that you do, please.
No, I mean, I told Fabian this. I said, I'm a lifelong learner. I was telling you earlier, I've jumped super high from not doing high jump. And sometimes,
exactly.
There's high jump, like you said, it's so specific to the individual, but it's also, there are consistencies that we see. And a lot of the time when guys just run approaches and do pop-ups, they hit the positions, their approach feels good, they feel confident, they end up jumping better, and they're fresher. So I'm curious to hear what you're going to say. I know Fabian's frothing at the mouth over there. He looks like he's
no, fair enough, and fair enough, and so it is that deal of, again, going back to the question of what are the volumes, what do we really need to do? So we've only had 2 jump sessions this year. We've taken a total of about 6 jumps the entire season together. Okay. Now we've taken a lot of jumps just in other ways. Okay. We've been on the basketball court a lot because he's a former basketball player. He loves to play basketball. I think that there is a 1-to-1 right there. We can get in a lot of jumping without too much technical thinking. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think that is one of the best benefits of the basketball court. is you can get in a fairly high load of jumping without too much conscious thought. And again, I always just go back, hey, the motor units aren't sitting there thinking about things. They just know that they're being recruited, right? The muscle fibers just know that, hey, you know what, we've been asked to turn on. And so, hey, you know what, we're on. I think you can get that done on the basketball court. The other is, say, a Vertec. We've been jumping up at, say, like 11 feet 9 inches, or something, and stuff like that. Trying to touch 12 feet. I don't know, what is that? That's close to 3 meters 60, right? So he's jumping at 3 meters 50 or something like that. Touching 350 or something like that. I don't know, whatever 11.9 is.
What did you say, Fabian? It's cutting out.
It is 366, so 11 I should be 357 around there.
Okay. Yeah, something like that. So we know that we're trying to jump very, very high, but we're not jumping over the bar. So we're not overly thinking about the curve. We're not overly thinking about the approach and things going on over the bar, but we are recruiting those motor units, in a lot of the positions that we want to. We're getting into those single leg takeoff positions, and obviously the momentum taking us through. So that's the way that I view that a lot. But again, Shelby, and I've told him this, and he says, Coach, I really appreciate that. Shelby knows how to high jump.
Yeah.
Now this is different if I'm working with, say, instead of a 28-year-old athlete, if I'm working with, say, an 18-year-old athlete who's never done it before, well, of course, there's going to be some teaching that's going to have to take place. And there's going to be some things, maybe some fear about going over the bar backwards, flopping over the bar, letting the rotations happen, landing on the shoulders and doing a backward somersault, things like that. So, those are going to be different discussions, for different athletes. But for somebody like you, I would, say, hey, number one, go and do all your basic, your basic fitness stuff, hey, you know what, some of the basic jumping, hey, if you're from Sweden, obviously, Stefan Holm made the hurdle hop, popular, right? To me, that is absolutely, without actual high jumping, to me, that's exactly what you do. And we're doing the same thing on the basketball court or by using a Vertec. To me, it's exactly the same thing.
So you're basically working inside of the constraints of, like, look, we can still jump, maintain some of this freshness. And then when we're in meets, we're going to jump. And then I did have a question. Do you do a lot of approaches in conjunction with that, or is it?
Yeah. And so we definitely
just run throughs or pop-ups.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, we'll run approaches, every once a week or once every few weeks or something like that. We're definitely running some approaches. We're feeling the ground. We're pressuring the ground. We know what it feels like to be in those positions through the curve and hold those positions through the takeoff and things like that. So, there is that definitely going on. Absolutely. But just being strong overall, being able to bounce off the ground, because essentially that's what it is that we do, is we bounce off the ground. You think about a golf ball versus, say, something like a tennis ball or a semi-deflated basketball. We're trying to be the golf ball, right? We're trying to be very reactive and bounce with a high rate of speed, right? Whereas something like a tennis ball or a deflated basketball or something, you know what? Hey, if you're not strong, right?
Yeah.
Everything just kind of collapses, and then you have to try to muscle out of that. And we're definitely not trying to muscle out of things. We're trying to be reactive and just bounce out of it. So
like on something like a hurdle hop, if Fabian's feeling like shit, would you be like, yeah, just cut it, you're not getting anything out of it?
And that's for anything. If you're feeling like shit in anything, it's almost a thing of just totally cut it in general.
Shelby comes in, he's trying to do quarter squats, it just looks bad, he looks like shit. You're like, dude, just go home. Like, go home.
I wouldn't. And the thing is, the good thing is that hasn't happened, but yeah, that is what would happen if that were the case. I think maybe last year, there was one day that we did have to shut some stuff down. It was just hot outside, and I know that on the weekend, I think that it was hot. It was very, very hot. It was summer in Houston, and I think that there were about 2 or 3 days there that there probably wasn't much hydration going on and stuff like that. And so he showed up on a Monday, and it was just like, all right, we have to kind of cut it short,
right.
or whatever. But for the most part, nothing else is happen. I kind of have an idea of what they're going to feel like that day. And that is one way that I set up the training is, you know what, you should be feeling well, for this particular day. If it's going to be a high output day, a high neural output day, I know that in those preceding days before, those are going to be days that are going to complement. So you're going to feel really well on that day. But if there is the one-off for whatever reason that they're not feeling well or whatever, no, we're not going to waste it.
How many high neural days can you get in a week? Do you think?
No, I would say
2,
definitely
3?
the most. The most would be 3, but it's going to be 2. But most of the time it's going to be 1, and it's going to be really, really high neural.
High intensity.
A truly high neural day. Yeah. And a meet,
you're talking like
is a truly
power
high
clean
neural.
quarter squats aren't counting for that. Like you're talking like max
yeah, I mean, they may be factored into that, and they may be a part of that day for sure. But yeah, that's going to be, I mean, yeah, but there may be a day that may be some sort of, almost like maybe 72 hours out, there may be a little bit of a stimulus going on that's gonna put us in a little bit more of a, wake you up a little bit, and then that following day is going to be off. Let's just say that Saturday is going to be a really high neural stimulus day, really good jumping day. Okay. Friday is going to be our basic pre-meet day, which for different athletes is going to be a different thing. I can tell you for Shelby right now, it's a deal that basically, that for him on a pre-meet day, we're going to do a very short mobility-based warm-up. We're not doing a whole lot. Some athletes, especially if it's female, they almost need a whole workout that day for them to feel better the next day. Those are different discussions for a different podcast. But for Shelby, for a pre-meet day for him, it ain't too much. You know what? A few strides on top of a few circuits, all mobility based, and hey, you know what? I'm feeling good, and that's his pre-meet day. But on that day before, which may be Thursday, that may be his day completely off. But on Wednesday, you know what? We nailed it a little bit.
It's
not be real high volume.
I'm supposed to jump on Friday. You know what I'm doing the day before? I'm doing a little shakeout. You know what I did yesterday?
Just a little shakeout. I
was fully off. You know what I did the day
fully
before
off.
that?
Yeah,
I
did some cleans or something.
Heavy
Squat
did
there.
some heavy calf raises, some RDL.
Exactly. Exactly. And you should be fit enough, and that's fitness. You should be. You should know that you're fit enough to handle that. And 72 hours later, that's when you bounce back.
What's crazy about really Fabian is is it Fabian or Fabian? It's Fabian, right?
Fabian.
Okay,
Fabian. Okay, yeah.
We're gonna butcher that a lot. I've already prefaced with him that. Don't worry, Pat. But he eats up volume unlike anything you have ever witnessed in your entire existence. This kid can do his week of training. I have on my board over here, and I'm gonna have to walk over here to tell you what he goes off feel a lot of the time. And I'm sure he could tell you this too, Fabian. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but when he's loading heavily, he'll go sprints excels Monday, home hurdles Tuesday, strength work Wednesday, bounds Thursday, and then maybe some tempo in the evening. Friday, he's doing strength work, RDLs, lunges, calves, and then he's jumping on Saturday. He is
got strength Monday morning. Box
Monday morning strength?
Yeah. Forgot about that one.
I forgot about that one. My bad. I thought that what I listed was more than sufficient.
I used to do, now I don't do as many contacts. Now the jump days might be like 50 to 100 contacts, and they used to be 200-300.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're looking at that. What goes through my head is that's insane amounts of volume. That's why I'm like, dude, maybe you need to rest, like, and recover.
And there might be a little bit of that too. That's needed. I mean, look, that can be the case. I mean, hey, I'm a former decathlete, and I came from a very high volume program. Okay, right. So I know what high volume fitness is. And I know how the high jumpers in that program, I know how they trained, and I know how they ended up jumping. I mean, I literally, my people that were a part of my training group were 234, 235, 236, in those ranges. So I know that there can be really high volumes of work done in really high level of jumping that takes place as well. So, no, I know what that is. Me personally, I wouldn't be writing in that amount of volume, but here would be the thing. If an athlete, if I were talking to an athlete such as yourself, you've obviously had a lot of years of work accumulation that's built up over that time. You can handle those amounts of work. Okay. Now, throughout the week, I probably would write something different, but I would always keep in mind that you have handled that load of work. So then it's finding, okay, what maybe is not necessary, or I feel is not necessary, but what are things that you feel is absolute, hey, I have to keep this in there. I know that whenever I'm doing this, I feel this is how I feel. To me, this stimulates me very well. So that would be one of the things that I would be, considering is what can we take away from, but what are the things that we have to keep in here? And also too, you have a history of work and those workloads are pretty high. So, you have to kind of find that medium in all of that. Go ahead.
I think, I'm definitely open to decreasing my volume a shit ton, because I've had periods where I've been forced to do that and I've felt extremely good, like power wise, but I felt a bit fragile sometimes. Like my power goes up a bit too quickly. Like a couple of years ago, for example, when I was doing really low volume, I hang cleaned 352 pounds. And then which was an increase by 45 pounds in like 2 months. So it responded really well, but it's almost dangerous because I get.
Here's the thing too. He's 6'9", 220.
Yeah.
So he's a big motherfucker.
Did you ever play volleyball?
No, never played volleyball actually.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Because some of the U.S. volleyball team in Paris, we were sharing facilities, and I was talking to some of the volleyball players, and obviously they're about the same height. A lot of them are 205, 206, 207 in those ranges. And man, some of those guys, they asked. I said no. I said you guys are prototype. Like, if you can run and jump off of one leg, I would say you're probably going to be a pretty good high jumper. But no, I had to ask that question because a lot of them are about that height, 205 and in those ranges. So,
what were you going to say, Fabian?
I was thinking before of a question when you were talking about that you substituted high jump practice with a lot of like vertex or basketball takeoffs. So I was just wondering, like, how many takeoffs would you do in a vertex session, for example?
No, that's a great question. So I would look at that very much the same way that I'm looking at a high jump competition. So again, as I think I was talking to John earlier, it's a deal that I would say that the range of jumps for a high jumper in a competition, when you include the warm-up jumps and maybe the total jumps, amount of jumps that you're going to take in a competition, you're going to look at anywhere between 12 and 16 to 18 total jumps, right? On the course of the day, total. That's warm-up jumps and everything. So I'm not going to be too far away from that in the vertex jumps. We're probably going to take anywhere between, probably 8 to 12 total. And that's just going to be working up and getting higher and higher, very much in the same fashion as a high jump competition. If I'm on the basketball court and hey, you know what, we're ready to rock and roll, and I tell Shelby, I say, hey man, let's get creative and let's have fun with this, and I want to see you really get after it. Show me some dunks. I think we're going to see somewhere between probably about 6, 7, 8, 9 jumps, and before he's going to start going, okay, coach, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit tired. So I mean that's I would say that's probably anywhere between 8 to 16 jumps in those ranges right there is what I think.
And that would be
it's going to be quality.
Of the work on the day. Would that be most of the work?
That would be the work. That would be the work on the day, and then obviously there's going to be a little bit of lifting, like I said, on top of that. Either right before it or whatever. Maybe sometimes even after it. I've definitely jumped beforehand, and then we go in and then we hit something afterward. But it just depends.
Found Shelby and a lot of guys wake up in the weight room and then they get after it on the jumps.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because I think that potentiation in the weight room, it definitely helps. It definitely, there's no question. I mean, even Ryan Krauser, the shot putter, Ryan Krauser. I mean, he's big into doing potentiation, big potentiation things.
Weird. I've never really responded well to it. I for some reason I was.
I mean, and I don't know the answer to this, and I mean, you don't have to answer this right now. This may be for another day or whatever. I would just ask, what is it that you're doing? I mean, it's
I've done. I'll get in there. I'll do a warm up. I've played around with doing light cleans, 135, 185, really fast, really fast singles, and then maybe 6, 7 reps. I won't even sometimes if I do some quarter squatting or something like that, I've played around with, and I've played around with French contrast a couple times. And oftentimes it's just like, you know, if I feel bouncy, it's like later in the day after I've kind of had my caffeine, I've walked around, usually a good
You're just
conversation.
naturally woke up.
Yeah. Like I'll kind of wake up that way. Whereas like one of the worst things for me is if I have to wake up early, get in the car and go jump. Like I really, really struggle with that. I need to kind of.
Well, I mean, Fabian, what's the earliest or what's the craziest that you jumped in terms of a time difference, say relative? I don't know. Have you jumped in the United States?
I did go to college a bit in the US.
Okay. Where I didn't know that. Where'd you go?
Wake Forest.
Just for a year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, and so I guess maybe the question is so for like, you know, so let's just say for like world championships or something, did you ever compete in Asia, like where for like a world junior championship or anything like that? Did you ever compete at a time that was like you had to wake up early in the morning and it was basically you're jumping at like 2 a.m. back home? You know what I mean?
I actually never had anything insane like that.
Okay. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, so it's a deal of like, so, you know, for Budapest or for, you know, whatever, I'm just saying in the last couple of seasons, like last year for Budapest World Outdoor Championships, you know, qualifying was at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, 10 a.m. in Budapest is like 3 a.m., you know, or whatever in the United States. You know, so it's that deal of like, you know, so there are, you know, kind of that, like what John was just saying, if he has to wake up, get in the car and then try to go, there are ways that you just have to get woke up.
Oh yeah. 100%.
You know, and same thing for Paris this year. The qualifying round is in the morning, you know, and basically you're jumping at 3 and 4 a.m. back home.
Yeah. I tell my guys, you got to go do a shakeout in the morning. You know,
that,
wake up,
and
go do a shakeout, whatever.
And there are ways
that
you have to. There are ways that you have to do that to get that nervous system just fired up. You know, to just get woke up, and it's like, okay, now you know. So yeah, I mean, we lifted. Look, Shelby lifted. Shelby one hour out, an hour and 15 minutes out from competition. You know, I would say, oh yeah, we were lifting. He's the only.
You're saying in Paris you did this?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What sort of lift do you do then?
It's just in the qualifying round, he did some light snatches with 40K.
Okay.
And you know, and that and then before the final, he had a lot of weight on his back. An hour.
That's all you got to know. That's all you got to know, Fabian. The rest is
like the rest is
a secret. You'll never know.
Like a lot of weight.
And that got him going. That was enough to get him really going.
That got him going. And says, as Shelby says, it's like, man, I'm buzzing, coach. That's what he says. He says, I'm buzzing. That's literally how he says it. And so, yeah, you know, I think that I think that you know, more athletes and coaches probably need to mess around with that and experiment with it. Don't be afraid. You know, because it's a deal of like, I mean, look, I just have to ask you, Fabian. I mean, have you ever gone through an entire workout and then maybe at the end of the workout you're going, man, I just feel great. Like I just did a lot of work, but I feel like I'm ready to rock and roll. And you know, for us, that's kind of the way that we kind of go about it. And at the end of the workout, yeah, sometimes you're smashed, but at the same time, you just kind of know, you're just like, but damn, I'm woke up. You know, my nervous system's on fire.
Yeah, that feels like a big thing this week, and like getting that nervous system going. Because I've also do strength Monday mornings. I feel really good during my sprint sometimes because I've done.
Yeah.
This might be something that we can experience. This might be the experiment next week, Fabian. This is more data, baby.
It is. No, that's right. That's exactly.
I mean,
right.
You haven't lifted at all, but if it was like, hey, in the morning, get out there, go do some hang power cleans up to, you know, for you, like 50%, fast as shit, 8 to 10 reps.
Like now, my upper body and my traps are so fucking weak. So if I did that, because I haven't hang cleared anything all
right,
year.
so 50 kilos, I think you could do.
I'm just saying that would get me sore. Like now.
All right. Maybe we would.
And that is always, and that's always the thing. It's always, sticking to what you've done.
Yeah.
What's the what all is in the toolbox that you've used. So, hey, there's the big toolbox of everything, right? And then there's the toolbox that you're using for that particular season or whatever, right? And one of the things that I do is I don't necessarily deviate from the toolbox that we've been using. All the tools that we put in, I stick literally to those tools the entire year. So we're not really changing anything. So it's a deal of like, what you're saying there. I would use something that you've done very recently within the last, probably 2 weeks. I would do something that is, whatever your lifts have been.
I have to take my dog out. You guys keep going, keep recording, but she's literally sitting here whining at me.
All right, looking at you going, I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, all right, you guys keep going. I'm going to listen to this
Fabian,
back. I get back.
Fabian, let me ask you, what's some of the lifting that you've done in the last 2 weeks? Just give me a core lift, like a clean.
I will say he's been off at the moment, basically completely the last week. I will say that before I walk out, but go ahead.
Okay, got it.
But so I guess if you go the last 3 weeks, I've actually haven't done any Olympic lifts, but I've done like box squats to a 90-degree knee angle. That's one lift.
And when was the last time you did that? When was the last time you did a box squat at that?
There would have been, 3 weeks ago, around that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's really, I haven't done that much in the shape of barbell lifts. Because John wanted me to try to like rest completely now. But I did. It's true. I felt really good last week after 1 week of rest, but today I felt like a bit flat. Like I wasn't really reacting. I wasn't bouncing off the ground in that reactive way.
Got it.
So like a potentiation thing could be like box squats in the morning or something like that.
I would say honestly, I think that sometimes athletes and coaches are going a little too far in terms of their timing. I know that there's some coaches that say 6 hours, or some that are doing things within 4 hours. I'm doing it within basically an hour and a half. So it's a part of the overall workout. So it's a deal of we're not really doing anything like hey, for the final, let's say for the final in Paris, and Shelby didn't jump until 7 p.m. Right? We didn't do anything that day earlier. We didn't do anything. I know that there are some coaches that they'll say, hey, we're going to do a little neuromuscular warm up, whatever, 6 hours before or whatever, or 4 hours before or whatever. We just go about the day as the day is going to be, go eat a little bit, have a little bit of a plan for, okay, going to eat at this time. This is what you're going to do. Okay. All right. And hey, we're getting on the bus at this time. And then basically, okay, we're starting to work out at this time, or we're starting to warm up at this time. And so we had our times all lined up. We knew exactly what time we were going to be doing what, but it was the deal of the last rep in the weight room. Okay, was an hour and 15 minutes out from the start of the competition. So we knew that they were being called into the call room at say 5:50 or something like that. We knew that at 5:45, that was literally the last rep. And it wasn't a very high volume. I mean, we were talking about maybe 6 set of 3, set of 2, set of 2, set of 1. You're looking at 8 total reps on the whole thing. 8 total reps with big rest in between. We're talking about over the course of about 30 minutes. So there was rest, and there were little, just so nail a rep, and then maybe nail a very short 20-meter stride or something like that. But that's just that nervous system potentiation. I mean, and that's just what a warm up is. To me, I just make it all a part of the warm up. Does that make sense? So. Yeah,
I mean that's really interesting, because, but like how heavy would the loads be as far as like percentages?
Well, we're not really looking necessarily at percentage, but we knew that the snatch wasn't going to be much over 80 or 40K, because that's where we had been earlier in the season at 40K, and he's just moving it lightning fast, right? So, and we're not ever 1 rep maxing. So we haven't done a hang snatch 1 rep max, or anything. I basically just did it off of my eyes and basically off of his feeling. And you know what? I'm looking at it going, hey, you're moving that very fast and very well. And he's saying, Coach, that feels great. So that's kind of what we settle on. In terms of anything heavy, like, a quarter squat or something like that. Again, we're not going off of a 1 rep max, but we're looking to get the nervous system fired up. And we just know from throughout the year, we know where we were all the way back in January.
Yeah.
In terms of weight, and we know where we've progressed through over the months, and we know what we can handle, and we know what is pushing the threshold. So there's no real 1 rep max that's going on or anything like that, or we're not looking at it in terms of velocity based, looking at terms, in meters per second or anything like that. It very much is a little bit old school, maybe in some of the ways that what it may be called. But Shelby knows when his nervous system is ready to rock and roll too. So,
but I get that. I also like going by feel. So I'm guessing just like, oh, you feel nice and aggressive and just get going, and it's about yeah. I mean, it is a thing that the athlete, hey, there has to be some motivation by the athlete. You know, I mean, hey, you have to know that you're walking in ready to crush it. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, there has to be that confidence. You know what I mean? I mean, it's the deal of, hey, I'm going in and I'm ready to rock and roll, and I know that I'm strong. I know that, in everything. There has to be that confidence. But you can't be afraid. You can't be afraid to try things. No.
So, but yeah. I mean, really a lot of it, like I said, a lot of it has kind of been, just questioning Shelby and also, seeing with my own 2 eyes what I'm seeing.
Cool. I don't know what I missed, but I'm sure it was really interesting.
Yeah, no, we were talking about, kind of pre-meet potentiation.
Okay.
And I said, I know that there are some coaches that talk about, doing a neuromuscular wake up, 6 hours out, or I've even heard of 4 hours out. And really, for the most part, like I said, the final in Paris or the final in Budapest at the World Championships or anything like that, those are in the evening time. So it's a deal of like, we're not worried about, doing anything that morning. We're not waking up that morning and, we're 6 hours out, and stuff like that. We just go about the day normally. You know what? Hey, get up, drink a little bit of coffee, go grab a little bit of late lunch or whatever it is. We know that we're meeting. We know that we're on the bus at this time. We know that we're starting to warm up at this time. We know that we have the call room at this time, and, and all of that. So our last rep in the weight room is going to be an hour and 15 minutes out, because an hour and 10 minutes out, they're being called into the call room. So, we know that the lifting overall, with all of the rest that we're going to take in between and everything else that, whatever else is taking place, it's going to be about 30 minutes. So we know that we're there at 5:15. We're going to be starting in the weight room, and we know that 5:45 we're going to be done.
Are you doing a warm up before the cleans, or is that like the?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, or before the hang snatch or whatever. Yeah. So I mean, it just depends. The warm up may be on the track. It may be a little bit of mobility stuff. It may be like this year. I mean, it's at the Olympic Games. It was hot. It's the evening time. It's hot. And Shelby was on the table with the athletic trainer that he uses all the time. Does a little bit of mobility work with him. And I knew that it was hot when I saw and I knew what Chris Yee, the therapist, I knew what he was going to do. I've watched him do it, and I'm going, Shelby, you don't need much more than that. So we go in, we do some side shuffles, go into the weight room, maybe do a couple of body weight squats just because of those patterns, right? Maybe we do a few push-ups just for a little bit of simulation, and maybe we do, a little bit of something else or whatever. And then we have some weight on the bar, and then we get that, we get that lift done, we head out, maybe we do a 20-meter Excel. That was the extent of the warm up for the most part in Paris. But it just depends. I mean, hey, if it's cold, if the weather's a little bit cold and you need a bigger warm up per se, and you need to be bouncy and you need to be skipping, and maybe you need to be doing some 100-meter strides simply because maybe it's a little bit wet and cold, well, that's what's necessary on that day. I mean, it always goes back to, it depends. It depends on a lot of things.
Sounds like you need to really listen to your body, Fabian, and experiment with some stuff. That's what I'm hearing. But I have one other question, because Fabian mentioned this. So you said you don't really do a lot of deep squatting, you do a lot of quarter squatting. Fabian was like, you got to understand, like, I'm putting 600 pounds on my back if I have to do that most of the year, a lot of the year. So, what would you do for someone in his shoes? You said Shelby's at 3.3 times body weight. For Fabian, was that 800 pounds or 700 pounds or something like that? I don't even know.
Like 730.
Yeah. So do you have a belt squat? Do you just belt up and brace up, or what would you do?
Yeah. I mean, Shelby's just going to brace up or whatever. But, I mean, hey, we don't have any history of any lower back injuries too, or any back injuries. So, I mean, that's always, I mean, I had a female athlete years ago that I coached in college that she had some injuries from gymnastics, some back injuries. So there were things that we just simply did not do. Right. So no, I mean, hey, it depends. There's context, it all depends on the person.
So you still think, like in his case, if I was like Fabian, maybe you should talk to them about getting, some belt squat options. Might be worthwhile.
I mean, and also too, there is, I mean, there's always some sort of option. I think that we would look at, hey, Fabian, if you couldn't put the necessary weight on your back to get stimulated, right? If what we may feel, and I'm just saying if we were any sort of, if we're working together and it's like, man, I just don't feel like that's enough weight, but the amount of weight that I would feel to just kind of get stimulated, if you will, get the nervous system just ramped up, I can't put that weight on my back. That's, whatever. I've got some disc issues or whatever it may be. There's obviously going to be, and I mean, it's like what John mentioned there with the belt squat or something like that. But where are you going to find? You're not going to find a belt squat at the World Championships or at the Olympic Games. You're going to find a barbell.
Yeah, I'm so more just thinking of when you're training throughout the year. But I mean that's a good point too. You got
or hex bars. I mean a hex bar could be. I mean we can always load a hex bar up and maybe just simply in those positions. You know what? Maybe we can get some pretty big stimulation from a very, very heavy hex bar, something that we're going to do. I mean, there are a number of different things that you can do with a hex bar. So, there are definitely different ways that I would look at it and consider. But what was going to be your question, Fabian?
No, I was just saying to John, I was thinking, because right now my box squats, which are at a 90-degree knee angle, there I've done 3 reps at around 615. So if I do, I think even quarter squats, we're looking over 800, sure.
Yeah.
Tired. So I think maybe just going to deeper angles is an option, like those 90.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends. Yeah. I mean, for deeper angles in the season, I'm probably not. To me, that's going to be too eccentric, and it's going to be too taxing on the actual tissue. You know what I mean? But no, I would,
like you're saying the fast school would be too long.
I think so.
It's going to end up kind of hurting you in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, what we also discussed was maybe like a single leg option, where it's like a safety bar, quarter squat, single leg or something like that, would be potentially an option. I think the belt squat, maybe try to find a leg press option, maybe is potentially something we could try. But, just something I was curious to get your lens on. But it's good to know. I mean, that you're kind of the mindset, it's just not specific to be doing that close to the season and when you want to jump high. And I guess maybe one other question is, in the competitive phase, you're still doing quarter squats during that period in training?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And usually it's it's usually taking place a certain number of days out from competition.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I definitely have to go because I have a lot of other stuff I have to do. I know you've got training with Shelby, probably pretty soon here, Patric. Yeah. Fabian, I'll call you after this and we'll figure it out. But thank you, Patric, so much for coming on. I have probably more questions now after this that I'm going to be asking myself, and then also I'll probably bounce them off of you and get your thoughts.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. I'm sure it was fun for you too. I don't know how often you get to dive into this stuff.
No, this is stuff I geek out on and have a ton of fun. I think we're very, very similar. And so no, we can go on. I know that we can go on and
yeah,
on.
absolutely. Yeah. I love it. I'm ready to move out to Houston and start getting back into
there
high
you
jump.
go.
If I can clear
I'm
2
telling
meters
you.
finally
There you
consistently. All right. Well, thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, well, thank you,
Fabian,
John. Hey, great to meet you, Fabian. Yeah, man. We'll, yep.
Cool. I'm gonna end
Any
the,